Hi everyone. Recently it was NAIC, and my last chance to qualify for the World Championship in Japan this year. Walking into the event, I had 205 CP and needed 100 more to qualify, which meant I needed to finish of top 128 people or better to qualify. I just want to take a quick second to talk about how the US system works for people that don't necessarily know. So the system is based off of something called Swiss rounds, and each round you play someone with the same win-loss record as you. So for example, if I'm 4-3, I'm going to play someone else that's 4-3. Then, after all of the rounds have been completed, your final standing is calculated based not only on your win-loss ratio, but also something else called resistance. Basically, how well your opponents did. The idea is that if your opponents were better, you did better than someone else with the same record whose opponents did worse. Given the number of people who signed up, it meant that a record of 6-3 would not guarantee points, which came as a shock to many people, given the fact that we were supposed to have payouts for top 256 people, which meant all 6-3s got points. As a result, I would need to go 7-2 to guarantee points, or do well enough at 6-3 to finish in the top third of 6-3 players, because those were the ones who were going to get points. Unfortunately, I finished at 6-3 and ended up 150th overall, which means I didn't qualify for the World Championship. I took my losses a little early, and my resistance ended up being poor as a result. It was really hard knowing that I had done everything I could, and knowing that it wasn't good enough. I cried a lot that day, and I spent most of the last few days hurting, which is why this video has taken so long to make. It was raw. I had worked so hard, but it felt like it didn't matter. I spent a lot of time thinking about how I want to make this video, or if I wanted to make this video at all. Part of me felt like a failure, and having to say it out loud that I didn't qualify hurts. I wanted to throw on the camera and just let the words flow out and see what happened, but that didn't feel right either. There's so much that happened this season, both good and bad, that I wanted to make sure I gave everything the spotlight it deserves. I spent the last couple days trying to put my thoughts down in a way that makes sense to me. I think what the best thing to do is to go through the season and everything leading up to it and talking about my feelings as well as the lessons I learned along the way. Going into the season, my goal was simple. I wanted to qualify for Worlds. I had only been able to go to 2 events last year, and I was planning on doing it big this year. I was planning on going to as many events as possible and really making it the focus for my year. Additionally, I really wanted to have a solid team building group for the season. I had worked with others in the past, but I wanted something a little bit more concrete. I wanted a group where I could build and grow with others, and we could become one of the strongest groups around. I ended up forming a team building group, affectionately called the Criers, but I'm going to talk about them a little bit more. Before the official circuit started, I attended an event in Connecticut. It was set up before we knew the circuit would be open team sheet, and the tournament itself was closed team sheet as a result. It was the last time I would play a closed team sheet event, probably for the near future. I was excited because it was my first time competing in person in a while, and a lot of my friends were going too. Plus, I had worked really hard on this team, I was excited about it, and I had done well with it on the ladder, and I knew I was going to crush it. I didn't do well. I ended up going 2-4, which is my worst in-person performance ever, and the start of many more bad in-person finishes to come. It was hard, especially because I had driven a bunch of friends, and I had the worst placing overall. To be filled with a car where everyone else had done well, and I was the only one who didn't, was hard. But I was overzealous. I had focused way too much on the idea of Terra Blast, and had too many pieces that didn't really work together that well. It was really a good wake-up call for me, and I'm glad that I had it at the start of the season instead of a little bit later. First official event of the US season, and it is in San Diego. I had played around with a lot of teams, but eventually settled on the same 6 that were used to win the Tainan Regional, with some changes that suited my individual playstyle. San Diego would be 10 rounds of Swiss, with CP being awarded to people with a record of 6-4 or better. Similarly, not every 6-4 would get CP. I walked into the last round with a record of 5-4, meaning I had a chance to earn CP at my first official event of the season. Unfortunately, I stared down a Clodsire, and I couldn't bring myself emotionally to KO my new best friend, and I finished 5-5. While it was rough not getting CP from the first event, I had been so close, and I knew I could get points at the next events. On top of that, like I said earlier, San Diego is beautiful, and I got to see so many friends after so long, and work on the beach, and it was really a nice reminder that Pokemon's events are worth it for the community that it creates. Next month is Orlando, which brings an entirely new format with it. I had been testing a team that I had really enjoyed. It had a Fire Water Grass core, as well as a Fairy Dragon Steel core. Going into the event, I had talked to some people and done some coaching. People had brought up some concerns with the team, but I had stuck with it, I had done well with it on ladder, it was something that I was comfortable with, and I thought it was going to do well there. 2-4 drop. My second 2-4 of the season, and my lowest official placing ever. It was rough. It hurt a lot. I almost cried in front of the bathroom, but somehow managed to avoid that. While I did get to see many awesome friends, including Andy LaVGC and Kanto Clark, it was overall a pretty bad experience, mainly because I didn't get to go to the Rainforest Cafe. Knoxville was next, another place I really didn't want to be, but I wanted to play Pokemon, and I wanted points. This time, I was using a team based off of the team that Paul Chua had used at Orlando, and I knew some friends had been testing something similar for the event, but had dropped it, but had liked it overall. I went 1-3, but I kept playing. I knew I had to do well. I ended 3-6. Undoubtedly the worst performance of my life. It was even worse than going 0-3 drop, because dropping means that there's a potential to end strong. There was no potential here. This was my reality. I was devastated, and I really needed to figure out what I wanted to do going forward. I was messaging both Aaron Traylor and Santino in between rounds, and man oh man, I don't know how I would have done it without them. It was arguably one of the lowest points of my life in recent years. Vancouver was 2 weeks away, and I was seriously considering dropping. This was my third official event in the row with no points, and I had spent so much money and time, and did I really want to keep traveling to these places just to scrub out and feel miserable? I wasn't sure, and it was here that I made a pretty important decision for myself. I realized I didn't want to go to places that I didn't want to be. I don't want to go back to Orlando. I don't want to go to Knoxville. That's just not something I wanted, but unfortunately my drive to do well this season caused me to end up places in like Knoxville and Orlando. I kept going back and forth on if I wanted to go to Vancouver or not, but ultimately I decided to go, because I had already bought the ticket. I was deciding on what team to use when I got a message that changed my life. It was a tag from a friend, Hannah S., about teams she had been planning to use for Vancouver. While I originally gravitated towards a team with Iron Treads, there was a cool team featuring Palafin that looked fun as well. I decided to take the Palafin team in the end. I changed some spreads after talking with people and locked in a team. I wanted to go to Vancouver with no expectations. I had been putting a lot of pressure on myself and playing hundreds of games, and it just wasn't worth it. Chalky, overall an incredible friend and amazing human being, told me Pokemon wasn't worth it if it wasn't fun, and the game was slowly not becoming fun anymore. It felt like a chore, it felt like something I had to do, and it hurt, and it was hard, and it just wasn't what I wanted. So I decided to play with a team that I liked and go in with no expectations. 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0. I was undefeated heading into lunch. I had already won more games than I did in Knoxville, and we had just hit the lunch break. I was feeling great. Coming back from lunch, I took my first loss, but managed to win my next round, bringing me to 5-1. Imagine my shock when I was told I was going to be on stream. It was a huge deal, and something that I could have never expected. To say I was nervous was an understatement. I was shaking so much that I was disturbing the audio equipment and was told to stop moving my legs so much. Even still, I managed to stay cool under all the pressure and win, and beat one of the best players in the country. Unfortunately, after that, I did lose my next 2 rounds and bubble out of cut, but I finished top 64 and managed to get points for the first time all season, which was a huge deal after struggling so hard in the beginning. My mood then was the exact opposite of what it had been during Knoxville, and I sent the video to my family, who knew nothing about Pokemon at all, but they were also excited to see me. It was an amazing feeling, but unfortunately it didn't really last long, because I was laid off on the flight home, which was a pretty huge bummer, because I would have loved to have stayed in Vancouver longer. It also meant I had to cancel my plans to go to Charlotte, which is an event I had been really looking forward to since it had been announced. It was really hard because I definitely felt like I had just found my stride. But I couldn't play in in-person events. However, there were still the global challenges, which were online best of 1 challenges that awarded CP and were really a nice way to make up for lost time. I ended up building a team with the Criers, which was awesome because it was one of the first times we had all really worked together and produced some kind of result. In the end, all of us who used the team were able to get points, and I got points not only for the first and the second and the third GC as well. It was a huge win for me. Not only was it the fact that I had more CP, it also meant that my team was doing what I had hoped that they were doing. We were working together and we were achieving results. And that is, in my opinion, why VGC is awesome. It's not just winning the events, it's getting those small wins too. And that, I think, really set a tone for me going forward. Fast forwarding ahead, I was able to get a new job, and I was able to find myself at events once again. And I had 3 events in a row: Hartford, Bogota, Milwaukee. Given how all of the events had been back to back to back, my plan was to use the same team all 3 weeks. This time, I was using something similar to Palance, but a little bit different, featuring Iron Bundle, Tyranitar, and Baxcalibur over Palafin, Ting Lu, and Roaring Moon. It was a super strong team, and the first time I had ever broken 1700s on the Showdown ladder. Also, since the GCs had been Regulation C, I wasn't walking in completely blind. At Hartford, I was 5-3 going into the last round, which meant that I had a chance for points if I won the last round. Unfortunately, I ended up losing, so I finished 5-4. I was definitely bummed, but this was the second event of the season where I was a win-in away from points. And more than anything, it felt good to be back at events. Bogota was the next week, and I decided to switch things up and use the team Sohaib had just used to get top 4. He said it was really good, I trusted him, and I trusted the results. 0-3 drop. I got too in my head about needing points, and fearing I would miss, that I played so poorly and it cost me the game. I was anxious, I felt like I was going to throw up, and it was the similar feeling that I had felt during Knoxville. Luckily, I had dropped early enough that I was able to explore Bogota and still make the most of my trip. I knew I was capable of doing well. I had done it before. I just needed to not get in my head about it. It hurt to do so poorly, but I knew I could bounce back. I also knew something else. If I wanted to do well the rest of the season, I needed to go back to Palafin. Milwaukee brought back standard Palance and a finish of exactly 128th. Any lower and I wouldn't have gotten CP. This put me at 105 CP, and this was supposed to be my last event until NAIC, which would mean I would need top 16 at NAIC to qualify for Worlds. Luckily, a special event got announced in Puerto Rico the week before NAIC. While I was a little hesitant to join, especially given the low max player count of 50, I decided to go anyway. Mainly because Sohaib was going, and I don't really trust him to fly alone. I was bummed that we were there for such little time, but luckily we were able to spend some time on the beach and see the island. The event itself was 38 people, with several people gunning for the day 2 race or their invite for Worlds. Given how few people were there, only top 8 got CP, which meant that this event would essentially determine if I could or couldn't make Worlds. 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 3-1, 4-1. Last round. My resistance is low, and half of the X2s don't make cut. I pulled Zach Thornburg for my last round opponent. I need to win this to make cut. And I pulled one of the scariest opponents in the room. I had to give it my all. And somehow, I managed to win, putting me at 5-1, which meant that this was my first official top cut. I was elated. I hadn't made top cut in an unofficial tournament either in a very long time, and to do it here at such a critical moment was awesome. The happiness, though, didn't last long, because I was quickly beaten by Sohaib. But hey, I was at 205 CP. The dream of Worlds in my first official season was very doable and very, very close. But, as we know, it didn't end up working out, and I finished the season with 205 CP. It was my first official event using Palafin where I didn't walk out of it with any CP. It was a great reminder that sometimes things don't work out, no matter how badly you wanted them. It was a reminder that I don't have to judge myself based on the amount of CP that shows up when you search my name. Last year at NAIC, I walked out feeling horrible, and wrote about my feelings and reflections on the experience. I ended up going back to those notes, mainly because I really needed them. Yes, I miss Worlds, but I came so close, especially in a season where I had dropped multiple events and struggled so hard. Even with those drops and horrible performances, I still top cut an event and managed to finish 6-3 at 3 different events. I hope that I can use this pain as a driver to push and do well. I ended up talking with a lot of others who were in the same boat as me, the people who had also missed out on Worlds because of the cutoff and how much it hurt. But we're not going to let this hurt linger. We're going to use it as a driver to come back stronger. I've learned a lot from this season, both from my successes and from my mistakes. And I hope that some of you can take what I've said today and learn from it too. And be reminded that you're not your failures. And just because something doesn't go your way doesn't mean you're not capable of more. I really hope that the words that I'm saying resonate with others and that you can think back about it, because this is a hard game. There's a lot of emotions that come up, and it's something that causes me to reflect constantly and grow as a person because I have to and because I want to. So, thank you all so much for listening. And until next time, I hope all of you are champions, and I'll see you then.